So Steve Young says he'd start Trey Lance right now. And he said it really emphatically. And one of the things he said was the Niners couldn't have said it any more loudly that they would rather have Trey Lance than Jimmy Garoppolo. He added that, and this is where I would disagree with Steve a little bit, that, it's a problem for them and it's complicated. It gets harder for them because Garoppolo has the locker room if he also plays well. And he's not wrong about that, especially if Kyle wants to work Trey in. But it doesn't sound like Jimmy's going to get much opportunity to just play 100% of the snaps. So he's going to just have to live with Trey Lance getting worked in. But again, Steve Young's take is go with Trey Lance because you've already told us what you think about Jimmy Garoppolo. He's not long for your organization. So you might as well start the clock now.
I think the most fascinating thing about you read, I listened to Steve's situation in the late 80s was how Bill had promised him to be the starting quarterback. How Joe Montana, who had been a Super Bowl champion and an absolute legend by the time Steve got there, they were kind of siphoning out, and then he actually never got to play, right, for a long period of time. There was like a 3-year span where, in his mind, he was getting screwed. And Joe would get hurt. He'd get to play a little bit. Joe would come back. And it was the locker room dynamics were unique.
Yeah.
I would say this situation doesn't parallel that one at all. And listen, I do think Steve just speaks from an area of an experience and because we all naturally do. But like there is no Joe Montana level saving Jimmy Garoppolo. Jimmy Garoppolo could be the MVP of the league. To me, they would, let's just say best case scenario, he won the MVP of the National Football League. They would trade him this offseason for obviously, right? I don't think there would be any scenario.
Yeah, I mean, unless they think they might have been wrong about Trey Lance. That's where you wouldn't do it.
I think he would get dealt. Yeah, unless something happened with Trey. But even if he just played a little bit and they were just bullish, let's just roll with this guy.
Yeah, if you're bullish, it's just to me I'm just saying that's if you went, oh my God, we fucked up with Trey Lance is not the guy. Like Josh Rosen style, the Cardinals.
Yeah, if Jimmy had won the MVP, what's he getting, a 1 and a 2 for him on the open market?
But you just got to be sure you're the guy you're replacing with can play. That's all. Doesn't have to be the MVP right away, but anyway.
Yeah, so I think Jimmy is just he's a dead man walking. We just don't know if that's going to be he just gets thrown to the bench by week 2 or week 5, week 8, or the end of the season, right? Because we know Trey's playing. I guess as of today, August 26th, we kind of assume, again, Jimmy's probably going to be the starter, but is Jimmy starting and getting 30 plays and Trey gets 15, right? Is it like a split? Is it they're each around 20? I don't know. Right. I don't fucking know.
Yeah.
To me, anything's possible, and that to me has dramatically even changed since Steve talked. This situation is, in the Joe and Steve thing, to me the major difference of Joe and Steve, if that happened today, Steve was one of the fastest players in the league at the time, right? In 89, 86. They would have played, but Steve would have had sweet running plays put in. It was just dramatically different times. It would be crazy to even think like that. And he was Joe Montana. But Steve Young would have played a lot more, even if Joe was healthy and playing today.
Yeah, I think Steve would have ended up on another team too. The Niners were his second team, but
yeah, the Niners kind of bought low.
But Steve was a highly drafted player, and then the Bucs decided to they went and got Vinny Testaverde, and Steve had a pretty shitty experience leading up to San Francisco with Tampa, and they had tried to trade him to remember the St. Louis Cardinals.
Wasn't great. Remember in Tampa, but their team sucked.
Team was bad. They were going to trade him to the St. Louis Cardinals, and he was like, the Cardinals at the time were as bad as the Bucs organizationally. He's like, no, I'm not showing up. So Eddie D paid a little money because the Bucs the story from Steve's book was the Bucs owner was happy to take cash, and Eddie D paid to get Steve. And then Steve's around for 4.5 years, basically 5 years, and it was partly your point is right. We've talked about the fact that Jimmy Garoppolo has equity with the organization in a way that Andy Dalton doesn't have equity, but it doesn't. It pales in comparison to the amount of equity that Joe Montana had with the 49ers.
For example, I'm just looking at the trade. The Bucs got a second, a fourth, and $1 million.
And the $1 million was a significant part of that trade.
And one thing I think Steve Young said is the $1 million made the deal happen.
Yeah.
So he still had, even back, that's pretty good value for a guy who's really struggling, right? Steve still had value around the league. That honestly, he might have gone for a first round pick even back then. I bet teams were thinking about it. which Jimmy clearly is not on that level,
Right.
which to me throws off the entire and it turns out it's aged well. Joe Montana's, I think, at this point in time, widely viewed as the second best quarterback of all time, and Steve's like a borderline top 10 guy of all time, and one of the true great players.
Steve probably wonders. I'm one of the all-time greats. I'm a Hall of Famer,
and I didn't
start playing. And
yeah,
till I was Taysom Hill's age. Basically, it really is a testament to how good he was when he got a shot.
Times were a lot different back then, don't you think? There's just no chance on quarterbacks he lasts the Niners for 4 years. And part of the story was he almost signed with the Raiders. But my ultimate point is Trey Lance ain't waiting. There is no waiting. He's literally playing right away, and he will eventually be the starter. If not immediately to start the season, by October, or definitely by this season, playing a lot. By next year, to me, he's a lock. I see zero scenario, which includes Jimmy Garoppolo winning the MVP, which to me would be one of the most shocking sports things in the history of our lifetime, right? If Jimmy Garoppolo were the MVP after they drafted, I see no scenario in which Trey Lance isn't the full time they build the franchise around him by this offseason, right?
Yeah. You're saying if he wins the MVP, they still trade him?
Yeah, I'm just saying I get where Steve's coming from, because he just said these coaches could say things and then things change. I just see no scenario, when even Jimmy's best case scenario, which I think we all agree is borderline impossible.
Not the best case scenario. If he wins the MVP, then he doesn't even look like the guy we've been watching. So if that happens, I honestly, if he wins the MVP, I bring him back. Trey can wait another year. He's just the MVP, if that's who he is. But that's not. That's not who he's been. So that's not even a real scenario. But I think even if you took out the experience that Steve Young had in his career, there's logic here, right? The most basic logic is you already told us what you think about this guy. And I think the Niners' response would be, yeah, we did tell you what we think. When we traded up to 3, we did that not for who Trey Lance is on August 26, 2021. We traded up to 3 for who we think Trey Lance will become, right? The Bills did not draft Josh Allen for who he was coming out of Wyoming. They drafted him for the guy that could become the guy that he was in 2020.
Yeah.
And so both of those things can be true. You can announce to the world that Trey Lance is our guy, and that tells us everything we need to know about what you think about him and what you think about where Jimmy Garoppolo is going. And you can also try, I'm not sure, we'll watch it play out this year. If, I have a hard time, I don't know what your prediction would be. I have a hard time seeing a 2 QB system last 18 weeks. At some point, I think Trey Lance takes that job. But it'll be fascinating to see how you arrive there.
There would be some how does the 2 quarterback system work? Let's say you're able to start 2-0, which they're going to be. I haven't even looked at the line for the Lions. It's probably 10. They'll be favored in the Eagles game. It'll be fascinating to watch it against the Packers in Seattle. It's one thing to beat the Eagles, right? It's another thing the shit's going to work against the Packers. Can you go
It might.
Is gonna?
It might depend. It's dependent on how good
I don't do 2 quarterback things. I'm just out on that.
Well, nobody does, right? The league doesn't do it. And that's not what Kyle wants to do, but it's just he has a guy who he doesn't think is 100% ready to be the starter in Trey Lance. So he's got Jimmy Garoppolo does some things better than him, but he does have Trey Lance who does some things really well that he thinks can help him right now. And this
I also think he'd scrap it if it doesn't work.
Yeah, it could be that 4 weeks in, Jimmy Garoppolo's just the starting quarterback. But again, I don't think I think Kyle thinks, wait, there's some stuff that Trey Lance does well. So I'm going to have him do those things really well, at minimum.
Well, let's say Jameis ends up winning the job. That's his
whole thing. Kyle's whole thing is just finding a thing you do well and just riding that.
Well, Jameis is going to win the job, let's assume, right? Okay,
yeah.
Taysom Hill's still going to play some quarterback for them every game, right? If he did it with fucking Drew Brees, why wouldn't he do it with Jameis Winston?
He's paying him
You could argue he might end up playing more. So yeah, I mean, would you be shocked if they hadn't studied the Saints over the last 3 or 4 months, just how they did it? Just see it. What could we do? Even if the plays are completely different, but just what was the rotation like? I would have ran a study what the last 2 years with Drew and Taysom when Drew was healthy. How did they use him at what points in the game, at what down and distances, at just what type plays? I'd want a breakdown.
Yeah. And
to
they
at
would
least
have had
just
that
kind of have
breakdown.
an idea.
To me, they would have had that breakdown before the draft, right? In hindsight, this might have been part of the plan. Otherwise, maybe if you have no intention to do this, what you're willing to take for Jimmy Garoppolo in a trade is less.
Yes.
So
True.
It makes the whole thing. It sounds really cliche. Everything is always I'm fascinated to see, but it is really interesting. It's not with the. Now you know who else could do this? If Mac Jones is the starter, the Patriots could do some of this with Cam.
They could, I think they will.
Like
if Cam makes the team,
it doesn't make sense for. Could the Bears do this, or is Fields more off script related? Is that one different? Why is that one different? Other than it's just weird to do this.
It feels like what's his name? Andy Dalton has like a naked picture of Nagy or something, because I would fucking just I'd be like,
well, he has a promise, John. He has a promise.
Bye-bye.
A promise to be the starting quarterback, and my word is my bond.
Bye-bye, Andy.
That one's coming too.
You know, if you're Andy, you should feel very, very honored and obligated to do nice things for this guy the rest of your life, because I don't think anyone else would treat you like this besides your family.
Yeah.
But in the NFL at this point in time in your career.
Yeah.
I think most people, even with Andy Dalton the promise, you would have had an open competition at quarterback once you landed Field. We've seen it all happen all the time. Right? I mean, Flacco got benched for Lamar, but like Flacco had done so much for Harbaugh and won them a Super Bowl, they couldn't just name Lamar the starter. But this situation, when you just have an unrestricted free agent showing up for the first time, to me, it's pretty crazy. Now, maybe you're just around Andy, you're like, this guy's a high level guy. It's just, I think people like him. Clearly, I mean, he's a likable guy. He's actually too likable. I think that skews people. It's like, God, he's just such a high character guy. And we get it. Can he fucking throw the out route?
So in his, I mean, last year's probably not a good example of Taysom Hill usage. Let's go 2019. 27 rush plays and how many pass attempts? I mean, not many, right? He had 6.
Yeah.
Because that was part of the deal. He only had 13 pass attempts before last year when he was a 73% passer. Kyle Shanahan probably kind of thinks like, I know Taysom's not intended to be the starting quarterback at any point in time, but that's just what happened last year. But if Taysom Hill can be a 73% passer in spot duty, like what does he think Trey Lance? He can make Trey Lance a 70% passer in, situational opportunities? I don't know. I tend to think, how do you think this looks early? I think it looks less Trey initially than maybe we think, although I'm not exactly sure how many snaps that means. Like
I
10
would
to
say
12?
10. I'd say 10 minimum. That's a lot of snaps, guy.
Yeah. But what do those snaps look like is part of the question. Is it I'm going to play him on third down, but then we're ahead of the chain so much that the circumstance doesn't allow, or I'm just going to plug him in to run some plays. I'm going to force it in there. Because if it's situational, then it could be that the Niners are pounding the Lions and there's not a lot of 3rd and 1s and Trey Lance doesn't play a lot.
You just gave Taysom Hill stats, and it felt like everyone was hyping up like he actually didn't play that much. 10 would be a lot. Because you'd be on pace for
it would be
170 snaps, which actually would probably be higher if he starts week 1 at 10. Like that'd be a shitload. How many offensive snaps you get? You might only get 40, so he's going to get 10 of the 40. That's 25%.
I don't know. That's my question. I think we hear this and we go immediately to, man, this is going to be
because to me, if he
crazy.
gets 3, that's nothing. If it's 3, I would say anything over like 8, 9, 10 is a lot. 3 plays, like whatever. He didn't even play at all.
But again, it's situational. So 3 plays could be the result of thinking going into the game, I'm going to get him 12, and the game doesn't. Like 3 to me is just
if they come out of week 1 when he's got 3, to me, then nothing happened. Like with him, like you don't really have a take besides he didn't really play, right?
Yeah, I don't have a take on what happened, but it is just to me, it's different than what most people do. So that's where it's trend. Like it's just an indication of what we think the trend is going to be, which is this guy plays. So the question then becomes, what 3 snaps did he take?
Yeah, 3 to me would be very underwhelming.
Like if he took 3 snaps and it would be. But again, it does tell us something. If he took 3 snaps and it was all 3 3rd and 1 situations, then I'm like, okay, that's something. But I want to see, is he 3rd and 4th? If he takes 3 snaps and they're all first downs after they've crossed midfield, like where is he playing? Is there any pattern to what he gets? Like that's going to be the interesting part. As much as the volume's going to be fun, but like Where does he get snaps if the game is, kind of in a close situation? What is it? If it's only goal line, that's not as cool.
Yeah, well, to me, he's coming in on first down. My guess would be, or short yardage stuff. Like, you wouldn't pull him in on 3rd and 10, right?
Well, you might if you think you got to, like, I've game planned 3rd and long. The Lions are susceptible to a freaking, I don't know, a 30-yard touchdown, and I need Trey Lance to, or if you've got a crazy run play that you want on 3rd and long as a curveball, I don't know.
Yeah.
I mean, Kyle is a creative guy. I think you almost have to think, like, where are the obvious spots for him, and then go, okay, where are not the obvious spots for him, and will he
if it was 3, I'd be disappointed. Like, I want to see the guy.
I'm not disagreeing with that. I'm just saying I don't think if he gets any snaps, when the game is close, there will be something in that. And I do think there's something to at the end of the day, Steve Young's take and your point, which is the quarterback is so different than any other position in sports. Like, you are the number one leader of the team. That is your number one job. I guess maybe it's not your number one job, but it's 1A with all the other stuff you do. You got to be good enough to be. And if you are not the only quarterback that is the quarterback, because, again, this is not Taysom Hill's situation. I think every guy in that locker room Drew Brees, Jimmy Garoppolo's not Drew Brees, right? Taysom Hill gets 120 snaps even. There's no question about who the quarterback of the team is. This is, what are we heading towards? He gets 5 snaps week 1. Well, you're his teammate. You look around. Is it going to be 10 week 2? Is it going to be 15? When you start thinking, when does Trey Lance take this job? Yeah, and that, I think, is the heart of what Steve is saying, is like, even if you think one guy's a little better, you're doing your team a disservice if you don't pick one of these guys. We'll see.
Yeah.